Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in this afternoon for Fran Stoddard. Let's start with the obvious. Television is a visual medium, and what you're seeing today is not the picture that you normally see for this program. We are using a temporary set for the time being away from the Channel 3 studio, and we're doing this to underscore the health concerns, limit the number of visitors who go in and out of the studio. Everyone, everywhere, has had their lives changed recently, and we're making a small change to protect the health of our guests as well as our teammates at WCAX-TV. We may need to make other changes, but above all, UVM Extension and Channel 3 are committed to presenting informative program that helps you. And again, we thank you for joining us and hope you'll continue to find value in our shows. Our focus today is on one of the region's most majestic creatures, the moose. An adult moose can weigh more than 1,000 pounds and stand 5 to 6 feet tall at the shoulder. They are the largest member of the deer family, which includes white-tailed deer, elk, and caribou. In Vermont, Nick Fortin is the Fish and Wildlife Department's project leader for both deer and moose. Good afternoon, Nick. Always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me back.
How many moose do we have in Vermont, roughly?
Our best estimate right now is about 2,000.
So lucky you. You and your colleagues get to enjoy these creatures and do research, and we know they're beautiful, and you have some incredible photographs that we will be sharing throughout today's program. In general, what's happening with the moose population?
So moose across North America are, I'd say, struggling at the moment. Their populations, at least on the southern edge of their range, which includes Vermont, have been declining for a few years now. Most of that is related to climate change in one way or another, but they're not doing great. That said, in Vermont, we think they've kind of stabilized, and we're holding steady around 2,000.
So you're beginning to answer the next question, that idea of what is, if we know, responsible. Climate change is a big umbrella, and so what do you mean by that?
Well, specifically here in Vermont, there are a few parasites actually that have caused most of the decline. I should qualify that the department intentionally reduced our moose population. We had too many moose in the early 2000s, so we intentionally reduced it through hunting.
So that's one way that we've had a slight decline.
But
you were doing that as a management tool on behalf of the health of the herd.
Correct. So that was to improve health. Moose were overabundant. They were damaging their habitat. So we intentionally reduced the population. That said, we greatly reduced the number of moose permits we were giving out around 2011. So for the past 8 or 9 years, the slow decline we've seen has been related to parasites, specifically the winter tick.
So that's something that we definitely need to be talking about, and I just need to give a bit of a caution to our viewers. We feel that in order to understand this, we do need to show you the pictures that Nick is going to talk about. They're not pretty, and the main thing that we're talking about, I understand, is you've told me it's something called the winter tick.
Correct.
So what is a winter tick?
So winter tick is a species of tick. So there are, I believe, 14 different species of tick in Vermont. Most people are familiar with the two that affect humans most often, the black-legged tick or deer tick and the dog tick. This is a totally separate species of tick. It does not affect humans. They're also native to Vermont. They've been around for a long time. They happen to have a significant impact on moose, or they can have a significant impact on moose at times. So they're sometimes called a moose tick.
How do you research this, Nick? And we've got some pictures that help illustrate different ways.
Yeah, so we've been cooperating with the University of Vermont on a pretty substantial research project to try to figure out why our moose population was declining so much, specifically up in the northeast corner of the state. And so we actually captured I believe 126 moose over a 3-year period, fitted them with GPS radio collars so we can track their movements, and those collars send out a signal once the animal dies, so we're able to get in there as quickly as possible and figure out how it died, what it died of.
And at some point this actually involves the process of counting ticks.
Right, so They actually, when they capture the moose, the capture crew will do a quick little count of a couple spots on the moose just to get an idea of how many ticks are on that animal at the time. And then for some of the animals that die, particularly the calves when they die, we actually took the entire hide off the animal, froze it, and then at a later date had a bunch of people get together and sit around and counted every single tick on that animal.
So again, you know a lot because you've done this research.
Right.
Some of it, frankly, somewhat extraordinary. You've done aerial surveillance you talked about, doing things by hand. So what are some of the things that you've learned as a result, that the state has learned as a result of the research?
So I think the biggest takeaway is that these winter ticks are having a serious impact on the health and survival of moose, at least up in the northeast corner of the state. Some winters, I think 2 of the 3 winters, we lost more than half of the calves we had collared, died because of winter ticks. In addition to that, they don't tend to kill adult moose, but they do weaken them very significantly, and as a result, they produce fewer calves. And so there are fewer calves being born, and of those that are born, not many of them make it through their first winter.
So we should be very specific that we're talking about a very one part of the state, and you call them, I believe, WMUs, or Wildlife Management Units.
Correct.
And you shared with me a map. So tell us about the area specifically that we're talking about.
Right. So we're talking about Wildlife Management Unit E, which we do split into E1 and E2. But essentially, we use wildlife management units to manage not just moose, but deer and other game species. Essentially, we've divided the state into areas that have similar habitat. So we can't really use political boundaries like counties because
animals don't respect them anymore.
They don't know where they are.
Essentially what we're talking about here is Essex County.
And essentially, yes, this is actually one of the wildlife management units that happens to line up really well with a county boundary. And so essentially this is Essex County.
So why is Essex County, or this wildlife management unit, so different from other parts of Vermont?
This part in particular of the state has a much colder climate actually than the rest of the state. I mean, we're talking a couple degrees, but that makes a big difference. You know, with what is a rain event in the Champlain Valley can be snow in Essex County. And so as a result, the winters tend to be quite a bit longer. Also, there are very few people in Essex County, so we have really large blocks of contiguous forest habitat.
Which is critical for the moose.
Which is very critical for moose. And in particular, a lot of that is in commercial timberland. So there's a lot of timber harvesting that's going on, and it's creating a lot of food for those moose.
So all of this is leading to, again, if we just reflect on what we've done for the last few minutes, the winter tick is a problem. It's causing mortality issues in our moose population. This is very limited to basically one part of Vermont. Half the moose in Vermont can be found in this 1 or 2 wildlife management units. So what changes are you guys now proposing to the moose and moose hunt, and why?
So what we've proposed this year is actually to issue some moose permits only in that Wildlife Management Unit E, in an attempt to actually reduce the population there. And we firmly recognize that seems counterintuitive to folks to sort of be hunting an animal to try to help it. But the reality is with the winter tick, the fewer moose that are on the landscape, the fewer ticks there will be, and therefore fewer ticks really causes the moose to be healthier. So we'd rather have fewer healthier moose than a few more moose, but lose half of our calves every winter. And
okay, or said another way, you want the moose population to grow, but not particularly in wildlife management units E1 and E2.
Right. The rest of the state, sure, we'd love to see the population grow, but I think we have to recognize that we had way too many moose in WMUE at one time, and we probably still have more moose than we can sustain in the long term.
I want to come back to something you said earlier. This is a native tick species.
Correct.
So as a wildlife biologist, as a wildlife expert, that must create something interesting for you, that idea that you have this species that is, how do I say it, a pain, but it's a native.
Right, and
there has to be a respect there, I guess.
There is, and so obviously, a lot of people's gut reaction to ticks is, well, just kill the ticks and control the ticks somehow. And while things are certainly out of balance right now, the ticks are a native part of the landscape. And so our goal longer term is just to get things into a more appropriate balance. The ticks are always going to be here. They've been affecting moose at a much smaller scale, to a much smaller degree for a long, long time. We just need to get to an appropriate moose density where these ridiculously high levels of ticks no longer exist.
So we've talked about the strategies and the proposals you guys have coming forth. What would happen if we didn't hunt moose, Nick?
As far as we can tell right now, if we didn't hunt moose, the populations aren't going to increase, most likely. But they would probably either be stable or maybe very slowly decline. And essentially, we would just be perpetuating these really unhealthy moose for the foreseeable future.
And it's a tragic story too, because as you pointed out, it affects calf mortality. The adults, maybe they survive, but they don't have the health and the vigor that we want or need them to have.
Right.
We've been learning about moose in Vermont, and if you'd like to learn more, check the Fish and Wildlife Department's website. It is vtfishandwildlife.com. That's vtfishandwildlife.com. Nick, as always, I appreciate you being with us. And there's more to talk about. You've agreed to come back tomorrow, so we look forward to learning more about calves and our moose population in Vermont. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
That is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit across the fence.